Hello, good afternoon. Welcome to 417 Magazine's How to Save a Life series, presented by Burrell Behavioral Health. I'm Logan Aguirre, the publisher of 417 Magazine. With September being Suicide Prevention Month, we have teamed up with Burrell Behavioral Health to talk us through the uncomfortable conversations surrounding suicide and how to talk to our loved ones about the stigma. Today is the first of our two-part How to Save a Life series, featuring suicide survivor, best-selling author, and storyteller Kevin Hines. During today's conversation, we'll discuss the uncomfortable stigma surrounding suicide, and we'll learn the warning signs of mental illness and different resources to lean on during a crisis. Next week, at the same time, same place, we'll talk to 417 lander Chuck Dow, founder and board president of Borrow My Angel. Chuck will share the powerful and emotionally charged story of his sister Charity's struggle with depression and mental illness, and who ultimately passed away to what was believed to be a suicide attempt. During next week's conversation, we'll learn about strategies to navigate conversations with our loved ones who might be struggling with suicidal tendencies. So let me ask you, what is in a smile? A simple smile could mean just a little to you and me, but to someone thinking about suicide, it can be the first step to saving a life. Nearly 800,000 people die from suicide each year. The World Health Organization says more people die worldwide from suicides than homicides and wars combined. This unfortunate statistic means we may be of more harm to ourselves than we are from other people. With us today is mental health and suicide prevention activist Kevin Hines, who will be sharing his unlikely survival story. 2 years after he was diagnosed with bipolar disorder at the age of 19, he attempted to take his life by jumping from the Golden Gate Bridge. He is one of only 34 people to survive this fall, and the only one to regain full physical mobility. The fall would break his body, but not his spirit. Today, Kevin dedicates his life to saving lives and encouraging others to seek help and spread empathy by sharing the message of hope. Thank you for being with us today, Kevin.
Thank you for having me, Logan. Glad to be here.
Also with us today from Burrell Behavioral Health is Dr. Shelley Farnan. Dr. Farnan is a licensed psychologist who serves as Burrell's System Director of Diversity and Inclusion and spearheads its daily Be Well initiative that has been leading communities through self-care and connection this year. Dr. Farnan, there's been so much anxiety and stress in the year 2020, so I'm so thankful you are here with us today to guide this conversation during an important time like National Suicide Prevention Month.
Thank you,
For
Logan.
all of you watching, sorry, I cut you off. Hello. For all of you watching at home, if you have questions that come to mind during the webinar, you can submit them in the chat box at the right of your screen. Please make sure you send your questions to all panelists and attendees so everyone can be a part of the conversation. And then if we have time, we'll weave those questions throughout the program. So we're going to open things today with Kevin. For those who may not be familiar, I'd really love for you to share your background and your story.
Absolutely. I'm glad to. Well, if I'm going to do this right, we have to go back to the very beginning, the day I was born. August 30th, 1981, in the great city of San Francisco in the beautiful state of California. I was born to biological parents, Marcia and Martino, who were sadly, after they had me and my brother, they succumbed to substance use disorder, drugs and alcohol. And they would leave us unattended to go do score or sell drugs. And one fateful day, one seedy motel clerk made his most unseedy decision, heard our screams and cries in his mind one too many times, and he called the police. And the police came in with Child Protective Services, and they swooped us up, and they placed us into the system, into foster care. Now, I had a distended belly filled with liquid, a bruise from the top of my sternum to the bottom of my abdomen from being malnourished. Mom and Dad fed us what they could steal. Kool-Aid, Coca-Cola, and sour milk was my first 9-month diet. And my brother and I would bounce around from home to home. We both get a vicious strain of bronchitis, and he would die. I immediately developed a severe detachment disorder from reality and abandonment issues that follow me until today. I always say that every time someone I love dies, I feel like they're leaving me on purpose, and I can't shake it, no matter how much therapy I do. Well, unlike my poor brother, I got very lucky. The Hines family adopted me and made me their son. And Patrick and Deborah Hines are my mom and dad. And they gave me my first opportunity at a bright future. They gave me hope. They saved my life. And although I had a very traumatic infancy, my childhood was amazing. And we were so blessed. Pat and Debbie worked tirelessly for everything they had and gave me and my brother and my sister, all from different families, adopted into one, a melting pot of a family, uh, the greatest gift we could ever been given, a second chance at life. We all came from destitute backgrounds and despair and poverty, and they saved us. But it was at 17 and a half years of age that everything came crumbling down. I began to have fits of paranoid delusions and hallucinations, auditory and visual, and I'd skyrocket into manic euphoric natural highs, which I didn't know what they were called back then. But then once you go up, you must come down, and come down crashing into the dark abyss of depression and pain. And you know, I didn't know what to do. My family didn't know who to turn to. My parents divorced. That broke my heart. I went to live with my father, and we just fought tooth and nail every day, screaming matches, yelling at each other, and we couldn't connect. We couldn't compromise our ideals. And I was so mentally unwell. He didn't know what to do with me. He'd never experienced something like this. As a father, he felt so alone. He felt so siloed. Who could he talk to about his son having a complete mental breakdown every day? And by the time I hit 19 years of age, it was a very rocky road, and I started to contemplate taking my life. On September 24th of the year 2000, almost 20 years ago, and a few days from now, I wrote my suicide note to my family, my friends, my girlfriend, and my best friend Jake at the time. I told them I was sorry. I wrote little pieces to every one of them. I told Jake to find another best friend, as if that's remotely how it works. Put that note in my shoulder bag, put that shoulder bag by the door. And on September 25th, I eventually made my way to the bridge you see behind me. And it was the single worst day of my life. I was hearing voices saying that I had to die, but all I wanted to do was live. I never wanted to take my life by suicide. I believed I had to. And I believe those are two categorically different things. Wanting and believing you have to do something. I made my way after a tearful bus ride, hoping, wishing, and praying that one person would see my pain, say something kind, and help keep me here. Hey, kid, are you okay, brother? Is something wrong, or pal? Can I help you? I would have told that person everything and begged them to save me. The only person to respond to me was a woman who saw me on the bridge. She was approaching me from the left, and she smiled. I thought, this is it. This lady's going to save me. I don't have to do this. I don't have to die today. And then she approached, and she pulled out a digital camera and said, will you take my picture? In that accent. And I thought, oh my gosh, how can you not see the pain I'm in? Must be the sunglasses you're wearing. And when she walked away with that camera, I said to myself, absolutely nobody cares, which was the furthest thing from the truth. Everybody cared. Every member of my family, every one of my friends, my acquaintances would have been there to rip me from that rail of safety because how much they cared. My brain wasn't allowing me to care. My brain was trying to kill me as I desperately tried to cling to life. And it would be at that moment that the voice in my head beckoned, jump now, and I did. And I catapulted myself into free fall, but it was the millisecond that my hands left that rail and my legs cleared it, that I had an instantaneous regret for my actions and the absolute 100% recognition that I just made the greatest mistake of my life and it was too late. I fell 220 feet, 25 stories at 75 miles an hour in 4 seconds. I hit that water, I went down 70 feet, and I made my way to the surface only using my arms. I had shattered my T12, L1, L2 lower vertebrae. I missed severing my spinal cord that day by 2 millimeters. In the water, a miracle happened. I kept going down. I couldn't stay afloat. And something began to circle beneath me, bumping me up. I thought it was a shark. I thought, you gotta be kidding me. I didn't die jumping off the Golden Gate Bridge and a shark is gonna devour me. But it turned out to be a sea lion. And it was keeping me afloat until the Coast Guard boat arrived behind me. And I know this because a man named Morgan McWard wrote into this TV show I was on when I mentioned I thought there was a shark beneath me. And he sent in a picture to ABC News. And that picture is of this sea lion circling beneath me. There was a set of pictures, actually. And my seemingly morbid body lying atop the water being kept buoyant by this creature. It was amazing. I'm very grateful for that creature because had it not been there, I wouldn't be here. I got to the hospital. One of the foremost back surgeons on the West Coast to carry on the miracle wasn't supposed to be there that day. He was supposed to be somewhere else doing something else. He opted to stay and do my surgery, a 10.5-hour back surgery, the first and only of its particular kind. He invented it for my situation. He is the reason I can stand, walk, and run. It's just been an amazing journey, but it didn't end there. It's been a very rough road, and a tumultuous and arduous journey from the Golden Gate Bridge to today. 9 psych ward stays in the next 14 years, the last of them being a year and a half ago, all for suicidal ideation. But on the brighter side of things, it was after my 3rd psych ward stay in 2004 that I had this epiphany that I had to follow a treatment plan no matter the pain I was in, and that I could always survive my pain, never to succumb to it, never again to attempt to take my life, never to die with my hands. I've had 26 treatments of electroconvulsive therapy in between there, 2011, after a 60-day suicidal depression. But I fight every day to stay here, to be here tomorrow and every day after that, one day at a time. And I'm so grateful that I get to exist. And I'm so humbled and honored to be able to share my story around the world as I have for the last 20 years. I started sharing my story 7 months after my attempt, and I haven't stopped. My wife and I do it together now. Often she'll speak with me. My father's spoken with me. I've spoken with the Coast Guard officer that saved my life. It's been also a great journey in learning the power of storytelling. And then just a few years ago, we made a film called Suicide: The Ripple Effect with my good friend Greg DeCherry. And that film has been seen by 1 million people in over 20 countries. And 300 people have said that film saved their life. So it's been just an interesting path, to say the least. And I'm grateful that you guys are taking the time at 417 Magazine to hear the story and to help me share it with the world.
Whew. Kevin, to prepare for today, I listened to a podcast that you did where you told that story. But hearing it live from you, I feel like you're talking right to me. I'm sure everyone else feels that way. It is a completely different experience. Thank you so much for your vulnerability and for sharing that. And Dr. Farnham, I'm sure other people have had some thoughts and emotions triggered just by hearing everything he just shared with us, how raw a lot of those emotions are. So, what advice can you give to others who might be having some sort of emotional triggers based on his story right now?
Absolutely. Again, Kevin, I just want to echo, thank you for sharing your story. Like Logan, this is not the first time that I've had the honor of hearing you speak and share your story, and every time it's powerful. Your lived experience is powerful. So for all of us, let's do what we know works to help our self-regulation. First and foremost, let's give ourselves the permission to feel whatever it is that we're feeling right now. We know that most of our lives have been touched by suicidal thoughts. And so our own stories are coming to mind as we hear, Kevin, your very powerful story. So first and foremost, give ourselves permission to feel whatever it is we're feeling. And then I'm going to ask us here to do something that we call rate our weight. This is a subjective unit of distress. 0 is we are calm and at peace. 5 is that we are completely dysregulated, unable to function in this moment. So as you do that, it's very important that you know where you are on that rating scale. For some of us, we might need to leave the conversation right now, and that's very okay. Because what is most important is taking care of ourselves and knowing what we need moment to moment to moment. For others of us, let's make sure that we are taking one big deep breath. And as you breathe in, let's all breathe in. We're going to breathe in hope. And we're going to exhale anxiety. We're going to do that one more time. Breathe in hope. Exhale worry. This story is rooted in hope and living and healing.
It really
And
is.
recovery. I've got this. And recovery. So we're going to breathe in again. Breathe out fear. We're going to feel it, and we're going to be in this together. It's exactly what we're going to do here today. This conversation is about suicide, and this is a topic that is scary, uncomfortable, powerful, and as I mentioned, suicide has touched many of our lives in one way or another. Let's not let it be lost on us, though, that this is about all of us deserving lives worth living, each of us deserving support and care and meaningful relationships. This is about us being empathic, engaged, thoughtful, responsive, prepared fellow humans on this earth together. This is about having reputable health resources available to each of us, and that we each know how to access these relationships and these resources. This is about hope, Logan.
Yeah, I mean, Kevin, what are some things that, for you, that really have been good resources for you coming out of this state and kept hope alive within you when that is such a message that you're able to talk about now?
It really has been something that really helped me was building a 10-step plan to better balancing my brain, mind, behavior, mental health, and well-being. And I did that after my uncle George came into my third psych ward stay. And he said, kid, your family can help you until we're blue in the face. But until and when you take 110% responsibility for the fact that you have this disease and you fight it tooth and nail, ain't nothing going to change. And he had this Time magazine article in his hand that he laid on the table, and he said, read the article. And it was a 2004 Time magazine article on how to better balance your brain, mind, behavior, mental health, and well-being with a routine and a regimen and win. So it was about how to defeat mental illness, bipolar disorder, with routine and regimen and win. And I'm going to share that program with all of you today. I'm going to put it here in the panelist column, in the comment column. It's called The Art of Wellness. And what I did was I took those words in that Time magazine article and I wrote this program for myself based on my own personal needs. And it's 10 science-based, evidence-informed tools, common sense tools to better balance your brain health. I'll just give you 3 examples of them, what I call the 3 E's: eating healthily, educating yourself, and exercise. Eating healthy most days, non-inflammatory foods, your gut to brain health, making it very functional and proper is really important. Exercising every day, or at least 3 times a week, 23 minutes a day, leads to 12 hours of better mood, better brain health. And educating yourself as to your potential diagnoses or struggle is very important, so you know how to defeat it. Those are just 3 tools in the toolbox, and there are many more. There are coping strategies. There are therapies you can utilize that work for everyone, and there are things you can do that even if you don't have health insurance, even if you don't have great medical care, these are things you can do and opt into your plan that are made for everyone. They're things that work for everyone. We know one size doesn't fit all, but people as far as Peru, Africa, China, and Japan, and America are saying that by following this program 6 to 9 months, for 6 to 9 months, they're seeing a dramatic improvement in their mental health. I know that when I follow up this program, I have a hard time, but I also know when I follow this program to a T, I do really well mentally, and I succeed, both in life skill success, and mental health success. It's something that I want to share with everyone who's watching, so that they can go home, do the work, and change and save their own lives.
Sounds like you, it takes a lot of discipline. And so it's something that you work at constantly. Dr. Farnan, just hearing his story and some of, we can talk a little bit about some of the warning signs, Kevin, maybe that you were putting out along the way. And then Dr. Farnan just talking about if those are kind of consistent across, or other ones that we might just want to talk about. Kevin, could you go first with just repeating some of the warning signs that you maybe were putting out there, but people may or may not have known were warning signs?
Yeah, I can express my warning signs for sure. I was dealing with, well, first of all, I gave away all my prized possessions. I gave a 20-box comic book collection that I'd collected over, 14 years to my little brother who creases comic books. That was a big mistake. I gave away a then $450 CD collection when they were cool to a guy I barely knew. Never got those back. I gave away my trophies to my high school buddies who didn't want them. And my speech pattern radically changed. I was hyper speaking, and I wasn't sleeping well. I was overeating, and becoming overweight. So there was many things that were going on at the same time, simultaneously, that were signs of great behavior changes in prior to my suicide attempt.
I think what we're hearing here from Kevin, and as we're seeing on the slides here, is that giving away those prized possessions, significant changes in sleep patterns. I think I'll just capture those in some, first to state that all of us are unique humans, so our warning signs might look differently. There are going to be those of us that don't exhibit any warning signs. But the things that we can be looking for are those verbal cues, so direct or indirect statements. So a direct statement example, stating, quote, "I wish I were dead," unquote. An indirect statement, something to the effect of, quote, "I just want out. Everyone would be better off without me," quote. There are behavioral cues. So anytime that there is a previous suicide attempt, that's something to be very mindful of. If someone obtains a firearm and that's just not in their usual behavior patterns, that would be something to look for. Someone saving up on meds, again, these are under these behavioral cues, examples. Increased moodiness, depression, those changes that Kevin has referenced in his own story. Getting your personal affairs organized, giving away those prized possessions, changes in substance use, this unexplained anger or agitation. These are examples of behavioral cues. And then there are also situational cues. For instance, right now, living in a pandemic, loss of job, loss of financial security, expelled from school, grades. Logan, you and I were talking about that. If we have high expectations for ourselves and we're not achieving to the level that we expect of ourselves, fear of being a burden, onset of serious medical conditions that we don't feel hope for. And really that hope word is going to be a constant throughout this conversation with suicide. When you know that someone is not feeling hope in their lives, they are not experiencing a life worth living, that they don't feel is worth living. Those are all cues and clues that we definitely want to tune into. And then when we have several of those on top and in connection with each other, our risk for suicide attempt and completion is higher. And something that I just wanted to be sure to share here is, and Kevin, you mentioned this earlier in a way more beautiful way than I can do it here, but suicide is viewed as the only option to a perceived unsolvable problem. It's not that we want to die, that people want to die. It's often viewed as the only option out of something that feels unsolvable, which is exactly where that connection comes in.
Do you want to talk about some of these statistics, Shelley? And then there's some really excellent questions on the chat, so we can move to those after this. Yeah.
Certainly. 2020, 41% of people reported at least one symptom of a mental health condition, and 11% reported seriously considering suicide. I'm going to go ahead and imagine most of the recent data we have is from 2018, and because of the pandemic, I'm imagining that we are coming up against a significant increase in suicidality. In 2018, men were more than twice as likely to die by suicide as women. Women have higher percentages of attempts at suicide. 1 in 3 people who complete suicide are unemployed at the time of their death. Some other things that I want to be sure to talk about suicide, and Logan, you and I were talking through here. Missouri has a higher suicide rate than the national average. Missouri is ranked 12th in the nation for completed suicides and Missourians dying by suicide. This is 1 suicide every 7 minutes in the state of Missouri. Arkansas is ranked 20th in the nation. 48,000 people die by suicide annually, and this is rising during COVID-19. And when we know that for every documented suicide, there are 25 other attempts to die by suicide. So this equates to approximately 1,200,000 attempts of suicide per year. The impact of suicide, at least 135 people are impacted by a suicide. 53 have short-term disruption, 25 people have major life disruptions, and 11 people have devastating effects on their life, meaning approximately 1 million people experience a major life disruption or devastating effects each year due to suicide. I think we could go on and on. I am always a person that says statistics matter much less than the conversation that we are honored to have here today with Kevin and the questions that you all are entering. If you're interested in the statistics, we can be certain to refer you to the CDC, the American Foundation for Suicide Prevention. There are so many amazing resources out there that we can gladly get you connected to.
Well, those are really powerful, and the one about Greene County is really shocking. So, you know, it really brings awareness to maybe how many more people are even struggling with this than any of us realize. Kevin, there's just some really great questions coming in on the chat that I think could help us, especially as we're framing it for where we live, and how this just could be more prevalent when we're not even really realizing it. So one of the questions was, you know, how do you help someone who continually resists help? And it sounds like that was, you know, a little bit about how your story was. What would you say to that?
It was, I resisted the help. I was after my attempt, the first 3 psych wards I was in were involuntary, forced in against my will. And it really was my uncle saying to me, you know, your family can help you until you're blue in the face, but until when you take 100% responsibility, young man, for the fact that you have this disease and you fight it tooth and nail every day, ain't nothing gonna change. He said, do you want to be in and out of these places for the rest of your life? And I said, no, Uncle George. He said, we'll get it together, kid. We're counting on you. And it was that Time magazine article that showed me, when I read it, that I really had a problem and I needed to start to do the work to get better. So I think that if someone's resistant to treatment, continually putting in front of them literature and information on what they're going through, what they're potentially going through, to spark interest in them, maybe when they feel better, to read that information and recognize the symptoms within, but also consider doing something a little out of the ordinary. Jerry Motto was a psychiatrist for the VA in the 1970s, and he created this thing called the caring letters. And these letters would be sent to psych ward patients from the VA who would go home. They would get these caring letters letting them know that they were cared for and loved and valued, and that they were wondering how their treatment was going. Well, they did a study on the people that got the caring letters, and the 50% of people from the VA that didn't get the caring letters after treatment, and the 50% that didn't get the letters were more likely to attempt to take their life again. But the 50% that got the letters were more likely to stay here and to live good lives and productive and healthy lives. And so taking that to today, consider having 3 to 5 people in that person who's battling the issues, direct circle, writing a letter, handwritten note that comes in the mail about maybe 5 things that they can count on their hands: compassion, empathy, unconditional love, non-judgmental, and the signs, symptoms, and triggers you're worried about. If 3 to 5 people are writing different letters about the same thing, instead of what people are saying going in one ear and out the other, this is something they can hold on to forever and refer back to. And what's come out of Canada recently are the caring packages. And these are a package of all the person's favorite things. Add that to the caring letters being in the package, and you have this whirlwind of hope that you're bestowing upon the individual by letting them know that they're going through hell. You're aware of it and you care about them. And just because they don't see what they're going through or in denial doesn't mean it's not happening, it's not there. And it tends to wake people up, because they go from thinking that they're useless and worthless and have no value to realizing how truly valued and loved they really are. It's fascinating. So those are just a couple of concrete things you could do today to try to reach that person.
I have to hop in here, Logan. Kevin, you saying do something out of the ordinary. This word, for me, it gets back to humanity, and the research supports it. So often we are focused on the suicide. We are so focused on the language suicide prevention. What if we go all the way back to, again, living life's worth living, being humans on this planet together? When we're walking by someone, so many times it's like, hey, how are you? Are we really wondering how the person is? And if so, let's pause and really ask, like, how are you? And listen and hear what the response is. And then have a plan in place. Like you're saying, so many of us, we're not trained. We don't know what to do next. If somebody says, actually, I'm terrible today. I'm seeing in the comments, like, a lot of times we are psychiatric providers struggling with psychiatric illness and mental health illness. And where do we go? You know, so this is all of us in it together. We all have the opportunity to look out for one another. We don't have to be psychologists, psychiatrists, mental health experts, leading health experts. We need to be good humans in it for and with each other. Doing something out of the ordinary. That is amazing. I've got my notes going here, Kevin.
Kevin, can you share your story about the woman you saw? Because you actually saw someone that one time, and maybe multiple times, with the story I heard you tell on the podcast about, you could tell she was not well and she was a total stranger, and you went up to her and tried to kind of, shake her out of it.
My wife and I were in San Francisco before we moved out, and we were on, I believe it was around Civic Center and Market Street. So if you don't know San Francisco, you don't know where that is, but it's the main thoroughfare downtown Embarcadero in San Francisco. And this young lady couldn't have been more than 16, 17 years of age. She just kept stepping on and off the curb, on and off the curb. And my wife said, "You're going to go talk to her, aren't you?" I said, "You bet I am." Because I could see that there was oncoming traffic, and I just felt like she was considering taking her life. Well, when the next time she went back on the curb, I jumped in front of her, and she kind of went back like that. And I said, "Hey, hi." And she goes, "What do you want?" And I said, "You look like you're going through a hard time, and I want to make sure you're okay. Is everything all right? What you're doing is pretty dangerous." And she goes, "Why do you care?" And I said, "Because I'm human and I do." I said, "My wife's right there, and we saw you, and it didn't look right, and I want to know if there's anything I can do to help." And she said, "You can't help me," something to that effect. I said, "Why don't we go sit down on that parking lot ledge and chat about it? I've been through a lot of pain myself, and I want to make sure you stay safe today." And she was just so taken aback that a perfect stranger would even care at the least bit. And you could tell how alone she felt in the world for whatever reason. Well, we sat down and I talked with her, and I think an hour must have gone by, and we kept her safe that day. At the end of that time, I said, "Are you going to take your life? Are you considering taking life? And she said, well, I was, but I think now I'll try to find some help. And we left it at that. And there was no exchange in information, you know. I trusted her to be okay. But I think we stopped that girl at that moment. And it was just because I opened my mouth and I cared. And I think that oftentimes we're too afraid to approach a perfect stranger, but you know, we're all human beings. We're all in this together. Suicide prevention really is everyone's business. And if we can take that attitude more seriously and more out into the world and our society, we can help a lot of people who are in a lot of pain.
Reminds me, Kevin, of I think a lot of times we imagine we have to have this specific education and training in suicide prevention, and really it is empathy and willingness and connection. We are all therapeutic helpers. Of course, there are trainings out there if that is something that we feel to build our confidence and competence in reaching out to perfect strangers. And we are all therapeutic helpers with the ability to instill hope and ultimately change a life. It takes one of us to do something out of the ordinary, to connect with another human, even if we don't know them, and change the trajectory of their life. That is awesome. That's awesome.
I just love that story because, you know, it really shows, you know, the humanness that you were talking about, Dr. Farnan, and what he did was so simple, and it takes courage and you know, would be super uncomfortable if we're being honest. It would be a lot easier to just be like, wow, I don't know what's happening over there, but I got places to be, or I don't want to get involved. And what he did was so simple and just kind of, you know, helped her, you know, distract, and then just a human connection. And so I think that's helpful for those of us who feel intimidated maybe to approach someone that we know is struggling, because it will make us uncomfortable, right? And then also just feeling like you just aren't going to know what to say or do. And nothing about what Kevin did is, you know, takes a ton of training. It just takes your heart and being, you know, the humanness. And so I just really love that, Kevin. And you know that, you know, if someone had been able to do that for you at the bridge, how different things could have been, right? Yeah. Dr. Farnan, are there any other questions or things that you see on the chat that you might want to touch on for this session in particular, or some of that we can, I know next week we're going to be talking a little more about how to talk to your kids or, you know, younger people maybe about suicide. But Kevin, is there anything that you know, if you're talking to a high school or middle school group, do you change your story in any way, or are there other ways that you try to communicate things to a certain age group, or is your story just pretty universal no matter what?
If it's a 4th grade up to 8th grade presentation, I change my presentation to be more conducive to their comprehension levels, and to be more cautious of language and means issues. But really, 9th grade up above, it's the same general presentation, but I tend to use a lot of humor so that we can laugh during the presentation, so that we can engage with one another. I do a lot of sourcing to the crowd, bringing people down. There's often times when I've said to audiences of 1,200 high school students in bleachers in a gym, if you've ever felt useless or worthless, come stand down with me. And I've seen situations where half of the attendants vacated their seats and came and stood behind me. And then I said to the principals, what do you think about this? And he goes, this isn't good. I said, what are you going to do about it? And it's really about taking the next step to address those students and letting them know how beautiful they are inside and out, and they're beautiful just as they are. And so I guess to answer your question, I change the presentation based on who I'm talking to, especially if it's military, law enforcement, or high school, grade school. But we can really reach people in need by just being kind, empathetic, and listening to understand, not listening to respond.
There's a question here, Kevin. What do you think is the single most important thing we can say to a person when they tell us they are having suicidal thoughts and or plans?
The single most important thing you can do is not one thing. There is no one thing. What you need to do in that moment is show empathy, show understanding, and let them know. People always say to people going through these problems, "You're not alone." But this is a person who feels alone every day. So telling them they're not alone is often very invalidating and automatically turns them off. But if you say to them, I know what it's like to feel alone. And if you're feeling that right now, I want you to know that I've got your back. I'm here in this moment, and I'm going to be here until I know you're safe. And showing them they're not alone as opposed to saying you're not alone is much more effective in those situations. I think that's something that people tend to forget. And I've been guilty of it too. I've said it 1,000 times in my speeches, "You're not alone," thinking that was the answer, but really that just makes them feel more alone. So by saying, "I know what it feels like to be alone or to feel alone," that often gets you much more of a connection with the person than the opposite.
I so appreciate that, the importance of validation. And I think so often we're so anxious internally that someone is saying and sharing with us that they are experiencing thoughts of wanting to die, that we get caught up in like just trying to fix it. And this isn't a fix it situation. This is a being in it together. So I appreciate that.
My wife and I have this thing, fix it or feel it. And when she says fix it, then I go and I get my thinking brain on. I go, what can I do to augment this situation? When she says feel it, I'm just there to hold her. And really, you have to assess those situations and be able to just feel it sometimes.
I think that brings me to another question, Kevin. For those people that are around you and your people, what are some do's and don'ts? Like, what is it that you need from your support team? For one, having a support team, what are the things that you need from your team and that you don't need? And how does that communication look like? It sounds like you with your wife right there, like you have this language, fix it or feel it. Like, I'd love to hear more about that.
Yeah. When I'm in a depressive mood or episode, I need her to hold me. I just need her to be there, hold me, tell me she loves me, and tell me I'm worthy, and that suicide is not the answer. Same thing with my dad, same thing with my friends. I need them just to let me know that the depressive episode is temporary, that I will get past it, and I will feel better again. And that I have time and time in the past, and I will again. I need them to remind me how beautiful I am and wonderful and good. And when they do that, it helps immensely. We all need that care in our lives. But the secondary thing is, I need to fight for myself in those situations. I need to be my own manager of my mental health. And that's why in the Art of Wellness, the last step is called the plan, a mental health emergency plan for anybody and everybody who can opt in their personal protectors into their network. These are family and friends that can have information on them to make sure that when they're unwell mentally and they're in denial, how to best help them. And I do that by allowing my doctors to have release forms signed by my closest personal protectors so that they're privy to my treatment. And so you usurp American HIPAA privacy laws, and they can make sure that they get the information they need to keep me safe. It's worked for a very long time. If you can build a personal protector network of people that love you and care for you, you're better off and more safe.
I love that personal protector network.
Shelley, I'm so glad you asked that question. Holy cow.
Ah,
So many good takeaways, Kevin. Holy cow. It's
Logan,
amazing.
there is a question here, and a very important question. I want to make sure that we hear from Kevin on this. So, a local community, North Callaway High School in Kingdom City, just recently lost a youth to suicide. What are your recommendations for post-suicide response, specifically in schools and communities?
Don't silence the school. Tell the truth about it. Hold a memorial if you can. Involve the parents, involve loved ones. Get the school talking about it. Don't shy away from it. That's dangerous for more kids. And really build trust with your students again. You have to share the truth of what happened, not necessarily the means, but the truth of what happened, that it was a suicide, and that we are here for you. We love you and we care about you, and we don't want this to happen to any other student. Open the counseling doors, bring in bereavement experts, bring in speakers, really just do everything you can to reach out to those students, letting them know that this tragedy doesn't have to happen again.
Thank you. And we're so sorry for that community. My goodness. Well, we only have a few more minutes, so we do have to wrap up our time here. There have been so many good takeaways, but Dr. Farnan, do you want to, maybe give us your top 1 to 3 that you want to make sure that you remember for, just tuck away for the future that you feel like we've heard today?
I think Kevin just says it. Kevin, you just say it beautifully. It's about human relationship, maintaining the hope. And I think for me personally, it's normalizing. This is any of us given the right, or might I say wrong, circumstances. This isn't an us or an them. This is not just folks. It is also folks with chronic and persistent mental illness. And it is all of us all the time, which is why it's like Kevin, you say, this is all of our business. Suicide and suicide prevention is all of our business. So I think it's back to that, maintaining the hope and really investing in humanity and working hard every single day to get as uncomfortable as possible to save a life. I don't know how many that was, Logan, but now I'm just excited and on a roll.
It was beautiful. Kevin, what would you, if you had one piece of advice or something you would want to leave our audience with, what would that be?
Yeah, it's something that my mom taught me, and I want to teach you. First, I'll tell you what my dad taught me, and then my mom. My dad taught me to hard work, Kevin, because nothing good ever came without it, and that includes your mental health. And my mom taught me to be kind, compassionate, loving, caring, empathetic, and non-judgmental to every person you come into contact with, no matter their behavior toward you, because you never know what they're going through or what they've been through. So be here tomorrow and every day after that.
It's gorgeous, beautiful. I think, one of my top takeaways is thinking about your mental health as a commitment and a regimen and a discipline, just like if if it's important to you to work out every day or, have meditation time, whatever it is, all those things lead to your, positive mental health, but truly looking at it as something that is our responsibility to work on every day for ourselves and those around us. And I hadn't really thought of it that way before. But Kevin, thank you so much. This has been amazing. And hearing your story, probably could hear it 10 times and have different emotions each time. Burrell Behavioral Health and Dr. Farnan, thank you so much for partnering with us to navigate this. It's uncomfortable, but it's important. And I'm really glad we had a chance to talk about it. Dr. Farnan, do you want to talk about this screen that just popped up for resources for those who might need it right now?
Absolutely. One thing that we are committing ourselves to is making sure, and this is thanks to a dear colleague and loved one, is that we are making sure that we are sharing resources that are available immediately. We never want folks to be at a loss of like, where do I go? And it reminds me, and I love, Kevin, like your Art of Wellness, it goes through a beautiful plan, and I look forward to all of us like taking a look at this. And it reminds me of we create these emergency response plans at home. If there's a national disaster or some sort of a physical injury, like we think through and we talk through with our families these emergency plans. This is something that I hope we invite our communities and each other to be thinking through. What is our plan when we have an emotional crisis, a mental health crisis, just like we think through a national disaster, a natural crisis, or a physical injury? Let's think through, what is our plan? What are our go-tos? So for us at Burrell, and again, Burrell is one option. There are many options across the nation, across the globe. So for Burrell, it is burrellcenter.com is one avenue. You can call 417-761-5000. There is a crisis line, 1-800-494-7355. We have walk-in centers, and I imagine there are a couple of more resources maybe here after this. There are national suicide hotlines. There is a text line that you can connect with. So we will make all of these available in written form. That way you can tuck these away. One training, QPR, question, persuade, refer. It actually creates a card for you that you keep with you, just like you would keep your doctor's number with you. Let's make a plan. Let's all commit together across our communities with Kevin Hines with us today, with 417, you, Logan, and team. Let's commit to creating a plan. That way we don't have to be surprised. We don't have to figure it out when it happens. We are all prone to mental health illness, symptoms, suicidality. So let's just start preparing now with the resources available.
Thank you. And Kevin just shared for his channel. So those of us that would still like to follow him and get good doses of inspiration going forward, that would be a great place to go. So next Wednesday, we're going to pick up the conversation and talking more about how to talk to loved ones about suicide and suicide prevention with founder and board president of Borrow My Angel, Chuck Dow. So he is a local 417 lander who's going to be sharing the story of his sister and from that perspective. So a different perspective on a really important topic. So we will do this again next Wednesday at 1. Dr. Farnan, thank you as always. And Kevin, just so much gratitude. I really appreciate your time. Thank you for sharing your story. I'm so glad you're here. You're important, and your time today has no doubt, maybe saved one life. Who knows how many more, but certainly helped us all as we try to navigate this when it, comes into our life at some point. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Logan. Thank you, Dr. Farnan. Appreciate it.
Okay, and this video will be available for others to watch after this. So if you know someone who would benefit from seeing it, please share it out. Thanks so much, everybody.